She closed her bakery late at night and took the dark alley home. 3 men cornered her against the wall. Then headlights cut through the darkness. A mafia boss stepped out, and her attackers fled without a word. What she didn't know, years ago, she'd saved his dying mother from a hospital fire. And he'd been protecting her from the shadows ever since. The metal security gate of Sweet Haven Bakery rattled down with a screech that echoed through the empty Chicago street. Lena Foster wiped flour dust from her hands onto her apron, her shoulders aching from 14 hours of kneading dough and decorating birthday cakes. At 28, she'd grown used to the exhaustion. It was the price of owning something that was truly hers. The clock above the corner bodega blinked 11:47 p.m. in sickly green light. She'd missed the last convenient bus again. The next one wouldn't come for another 40 minutes, which meant either waiting under the flickering streetlight with the junkies and rats, or cutting through the alley behind Morelli's old warehouse to catch the express line on Madison Street.
Lena chose the alley. She always chose the alley.
Her sneakers splashed through a puddle that smelled like motor oil and regret. The brick walls on either side seemed to lean inward, making the passage feel narrower than it actually was. Somewhere behind her, a bottle shattered. She walked faster, her hand instinctively moving to the pepper spray keychain her friend Maya had given her last Christmas. Well, well, well. Look what we got here. 3 shapes detached themselves from the shadows ahead. Lena's heart kicked against her ribs like a trapped animal. She stopped walking, her mind racing through options. Back the way she came, blocked by the fence she'd just passed. Forward, blocked by 3 men who were spreading out across the alleys with like a human net. Little late to be out alone, sweetheart, the middle one said. He was tall, with a spider-web tattoo creeping up his neck. His smile showed a gold tooth that caught the distant streetlight. Dangerous neighborhood. All kinds of bad people. I don't want any trouble, Lena said, hating how her voice shook. She took a step backward. They took 2 steps forward. Nobody wants trouble, the one on the left laughed. He was shorter, stockier, wearing a Bulls jersey that had seen better days. But sometimes trouble finds you anyway. How much cash you got in that little bag?
$20.
Maybe 30-inch. It was actually $73, tonight's tips from the Mason wedding cake delivery. But she'd learned years ago that admitting to having money only made things worse. You can have it. Just let me go. Spiderweb neck shook his head slowly. See, that's not really how this works. We take what we want, and what we want. His eyes traveled up and down her body in a way that made her skin crawl. Might be more than just your cash. Lena's hand closed around the pepper spray. Her thumb found the trigger. The 3rd man, who'd been silent until now, noticed the movement. She's got something. Check her. They started forward. Lena raised the canister, but her hands were shaking so badly she wasn't sure she could aim. Her mind flashed to every self-defense class she'd taken, every news report she'd seen about women who fought back and women who didn't, and how both groups sometimes ended up in body bags anyway. Then the world turned white. Headlights, bright, blazing, expensive headlights, sliced through the darkness like a knife through butter. A car engine purred with the kind of low, predatory rumble that cost more than Lena made in a year. The 3 men froze like deer caught on a highway. A black Mercedes S-Class rolled to a stop at the alley's entrance, blocking their escape route. The headlights remained on, high beams painting everything in harsh shadows. For several seconds, nothing happened. The only sound was the gentle tick of the cooling engine and Lena's ragged breathing. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, and even in silhouette, Lena could tell he was different. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never been afraid of anything in his life. Tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders under what looked like a tailored suit. As he walked forward into the light, Lena saw his face. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair swept back, eyes so intense they seemed to glow like a wolf's caught in lamplight. But it wasn't his appearance that made the 3 attackers shrink back against the wall. It was the way he walked. Like he owned not just the alley, but the entire city. like violence was a language he spoke fluently, and he was about to deliver a very short speech. "Gentlemen," the man said, his voice calm and quiet as a whisper in a cathedral. "You seem lost." Spiderweb neck found his courage first, probably because he hadn't lived in Chicago long enough to recognize death when it bought a custom suit. "Mind your business, friend. This doesn't concern." The man raised one hand. Just lifted it, palm out, like a priest offering a blessing. Spiderweb neck's words died in his throat. "Adrian Moretti," the Bulls jersey thug whispered, and the name fell like a stone into still water. "Oh shit. Oh shit, man, we didn't know." So that was his name. Lena had heard it before, whispered in bakery lines and shouted on street corners. Adrian Moretti. The man who ran the South Side like a private kingdom. The one the police couldn't touch because half of them were on his payroll. The one whose name made grown men cross the street. Adrian walked past the three thugs as if they were furniture, stopping directly beside Lena. Up close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody that made her bakery's vanilla extract seem like cheap perfume. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on the three men. "You hurt what's mine," he said, each word dropping like a hammer blow, "and you disappear. Not arrested. Not hospitalized. You simply cease to exist. Do you understand the distinction?" "We weren't gonna hurt her, Mr. Moretti," the stocky one stammered. "Just having a conversation." "You surrounded a woman in an alley at midnight." Adrian's tone didn't rise, but somehow became more terrifying in its steadiness. "In my city. On my street. And you expect me to believe your intentions were honorable?" Silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums. "Leave," Adrian said. "If I see your faces again, any of you, anywhere in Chicago, I'll assume you've chosen to test my patience. And my patience, gentlemen, died a long time ago." They ran. Actually ran, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape, disappearing around the corners so fast that Bull's jersey guy left his shoe behind in a puddle. Lena stood frozen, her pepper spray still clutched uselessly in her hand. Adrian finally turned to look at her, and she saw his eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds or gunmetal or ice. "You work for me now," he said, and it wasn't a question or an invitation. It was a statement of fact, like announcing the sky was blue or water was wet. "What?" Lena's voice came out as a croak. I don't even know you." "That's going to change." He pulled a business card from his pocket and pressed it into her palm. His fingers were warm, slightly rough at the tips. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. That address. Don't be late." "Why would I?" "Because you're owed," he interrupted quietly. "And I pay my debts. Not because you're owned. Because you're owed. There's a difference, Miss Foster, and you'll learn it." He knew her name. He knew her name. Before she could form another question, Adrian returned to his Mercedes, the door closing with a solid thunk of German engineering. The car glided away, leaving Lena alone in the alley with a business card, $73, and the distinct feeling that her ordinary life had just ended. She looked down at the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, Moretti Enterprises. Adrian Moretti, CEO. Beneath it, in smaller print, every debt gets paid. Lena didn't sleep. She sat at her tiny kitchen table in the studio apartment above a laundromat, staring at Adrian Moretti's business card like it might suddenly sprout fangs and bite her. The address printed on it was in Gold Coast, the part of Chicago where people wore their wealth like armor and wouldn't be caught dead eating at her bakery. By 6 a.m., she'd convinced herself not to go. By 7 a.m., she'd changed her mind. By 8 a.m., she was standing in the shower, arguing with herself while hot water turned her skin pink. He's saved your life. The least you can do is hear him out. He's a criminal. Everyone knows what he does. He also said you're owed something. What if it's important? At 8:47 a.m., Lena stood outside Sweet Haven Bakery, keys in hand, and froze. The security gate was already up. Not just up, gone. Replaced by a new one that gleamed silver in the morning sun, with an electronic keypad where her old rusty padlock used to hang. Through the window, she could see movement inside. Multiple people, working. What the hell? She rushed forward, shouldering through the door that now opened smoothly instead of sticking like it had for 3 years. Her bakery was full of strangers. 6 men in work clothes were everywhere, one on a ladder replacing the ancient fluorescent lights with modern fixtures, 2 repainting the water-stained back wall in a crisp cream color, another installing new shelving where her warped wooden boards used to sag. The display case had been replaced with a gleaming glass model that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Stop," Lena shouted, dropping her purse. "Stop right now. Who are you people?" A man in a charcoal suit appeared from the back room, holding a clipboard. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of calm expression that suggested he'd seen everything twice. "Miss Foster. Good morning. My name is Vincent. Mr. Moretti sent us to make some necessary improvements." "Necessary?" Lena sputtered. "He can't just break into my business and redecorate." "We didn't break in. We had keys." Vincent produced a set identical to hers. "Mr. Moretti owns the building." The words hit like cold water. "What?" "The property deed transferred to Moretti Enterprises 8 months ago. The previous landlord, Mr. Chen, sold his holdings when he retired to Florida." Vincent checked his clipboard. "Your lease agreement remains unchanged, of course. Same rent, same terms." But Mr. Moretti felt certain safety and structural concerns needed immediate attention. Lena looked around wildly. In the back room, someone was installing a new industrial mixer, the kind she'd been saving for, the kind that cost $8,000. Premium bags of flour were stacked against the wall, brand names she recognized from cooking shows. A crate of vanilla beans sat open on her counter, the real Madagascar ones that smelled like dreams and cost $40 a pound. "This is insane," she whispered. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," Vincent agreed pleasantly. "You didn't. But Mr. Moretti insists. He also insists you meet him at his office. He's waiting." "I'm not going anywhere until you all leave my bakery." Vincent's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Not quite pity, more like understanding. "Miss Foster, these men will continue working whether you're here or not." Mr. Moretti's instructions were very clear. "The renovations will be complete by end of day. Your choice is whether you waste the morning watching them work or use it productively by understanding why this is happening." Lena wanted to scream. She wanted to call the police. Except what would she say? Someone's illegally improving my business without permission? She wanted to cry, but she'd learned years ago that tears solved nothing in a city that would step over your body to catch the train. "Fine," she bit out. "But I'm not working for him. I'm not joining the mob or laundering money or whatever this is." "Of course not," Vincent said smoothly. "Mr. Moretti is a legitimate businessman. He owns restaurants, import companies, real estate. Everything legal and above board." The way he said it suggested they both knew that wasn't entirely true, but also that it didn't matter. 20 minutes later, Lena sat in the back of a town car that smelled like leather and money, watching Chicago stream past the tinted windows. They pulled up to a building that looked like it ate other buildings for breakfast, all glass and steel, with a doorman who tipped his hat and called her Miss Foster, like he'd been expecting her. The elevator rode so smoothly she barely felt it move. 37th floor. The doors opened onto an office that could have fit her entire bakery inside it twice. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake, where morning sun turned the water into hammered copper. Adrian Moretti stood with his back to her, hands in his pockets, watching the city. He didn't turn when she entered. "You can't do this," Lena said, her voice stronger than she felt. "You can't just take over my life." "I'm not taking over anything," he turned finally, and in daylight, she could see details she'd missed last night. The thin scar above his left eyebrow, the gray threading through his dark hair at the temples, the way his suit probably cost more than her car. "I'm paying a debt." "What debt?" "I've never met you before last night." Adrian walked to his desk and picked up a folder. "Sit down, Miss Foster. It's time you learned what you're owed, And why protecting you isn't charity. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. It's the least I could do for the woman who saved my mother's life. The words made no sense. Lena stood frozen, her mind racing through memories, searching for a connection that couldn't possibly exist. I think, she said slowly, you have the wrong person.
No, Adrián replied.
I don't. Lena sat because her legs suddenly felt unreliable. Adrian placed the folder on the desk between them, but didn't open it yet. Instead, he walked to a small table by the window where silver coffee service sat waiting. Coffee, he asked. Answers, Lena countered. I want answers, not coffee. You can have both. He poured 2 cups anyway, adding cream to one without asking. Somehow he knew she took cream. He knew too many things about her, and each piece of knowledge felt like an invasion she hadn't consented to. He set the cup in front of her and finally opened the folder. Inside were photographs, old ones, the kind printed on actual paper instead of trapped in phones. He slid one across the desk. 4 years ago. St. Catherine's Hospital. Do you remember? Lena picked up the photo with trembling fingers. It showed a woman, maybe 60, with dark hair going silver, lying in a hospital bed. She was unconscious, oxygen tubes in her nose, burns visible on her arms. But it was her face that made Lena's breath catch. She swallowed hard. The fire. The East Wing fire. You remember, it wasn't a question. The memories came flooding back, sharper than she expected. She'd been 24 then, working double shifts at St. Catherine's as a dietary aide to pay for culinary school. It was late, almost midnight, and she'd been delivering meal trays to the night nurse's station when the fire alarm screamed to life. Not a drill. Real smoke, thick and black, pouring from the electrical room like a living thing. Everyone evacuated, Lena heard herself saying, her voice distant. The nurses, the doctors, they were moving patients. But the elevators were shut down, and the East Wing stairs were already blocked. There was a woman. She looked up sharply. Room 412. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. My mother. Isabella Moretti. She'd had surgery that morning.
Hip Zeppelin sen.
She was still sedated, couldn't walk. The details crystallized in Lena's mind like frost on glass. Everyone was focused on the West Wing, because that's where most patients were. But I delivered her dinner tray earlier, and I remembered. You went back, Adrian finished quietly. While everyone else ran out, you ran in. Lena set down the photo, her hands shaking. The smoke was so thick. I couldn't see anything. I crawled on the floor like they teach you in school, felt my way along the wall. Found her room. She was still in bed, unconscious. She closed her eyes, remembering the weight of the woman against her shoulders, the way her lungs had burned with every breath. I got her to the service stairs on the south side. The ones the maintenance staff use. Dragged her down 3 flights. You dislocated your shoulder, Adrian said, and there was something raw in his voice now. Tore your rotator cuff. You were in physical therapy for 6 months. How do you? But of course he knew. He knew everything. Adrian pulled out another photograph. This one showed Lena herself, younger, thinner, with her arm in a sling, talking to a police officer outside the hospital. She didn't remember anyone taking that picture. The hospital put you on medical leave, Adrian continued. Paid for your initial treatment, but not the physical therapy you needed. You couldn't afford it on your own. Lost your job because you couldn't perform the physical requirements anymore. He looked directly at her. You also lost your tuition money for culinary school because you had to pay medical bills instead. Tears burned behind Lena's eyes. Those had been dark months. Painful months. The months when she'd learned that heroism didn't pay rent and courage didn't heal torn muscles. Your mother survived, Lena said. It came out as a question. She lived for 2 more years. Good years. She got to meet her first grandchild. Attended my sister's wedding. Baked Christmas cookies one last time. Adrian's expression softened. 2 years we wouldn't have had without you. She died peacefully in her sleep, not screaming in a fire. I didn't do it for a reward. I know. He pushed the folder closer. That's why you deserve one. After she died, I tried to find you. But you'd moved. Changed apartments 3 times. The hospital wouldn't give me information, privacy laws. It took my people 8 months to track you down. Lena opened the folder fully. Inside were documents, bank statements, payment receipts, business licenses. Her hands froze when she saw the amounts. The bakery startup loan you got 3 years ago, Adrian said. The one from that small business grant program that seemed too good to be true? I funded it through a shell company. The rent on your apartment, 30% below market rate because your landlord's property taxes mysteriously decreased? I bought the building. The premium flour supplier who gives you wholesale prices normally reserved for restaurants? One of my companies. Lena couldn't finish the sentence. Paying you back. From a distance. Keeping you safe without interfering in your life, he leaned forward. Until last night, when staying distant wasn't an option anymore. Why didn't you just tell me? Because the kind of gratitude I owed you doesn't come with strings attached. Adrian's gray eyes held hers. And because the moment you knew who I was, you'd become a target. Anyone who wants to hurt me would see you as leverage.
I was trying to protect you from that.
But last night, those men forced my hand. They cornered you in my territory. If I'd driven past, if I'd done nothing, they would have hurt you, his voice hardened. And I would have failed my mother's memory. So now we're here, and you need to understand something, Miss Foster. Lena waited, her heart pounding. Your bakery contract with my restaurants is real. The work is real. But more than that, you're under my protection now, whether you want it or not. Because the people who want me dead just learned you're important to me, he stood, buttoning his suit jacket. And in my world, that knowledge is a death sentence unless I make it very clear what happens to anyone who touches you. Lena spent the rest of that day in a fog. She signed the restaurant contract, a legitimate agreement to supply pastries to 3 high-end establishments Adrian owned downtown. The terms were generous but not suspiciously so. Everything looked legal, professional, normal. Except nothing was normal anymore. She returned to Sweet Haven late afternoon to find the renovations complete. Her bakery looked like something from a magazine spread, gleaming equipment, perfect lighting, new tile floors that didn't crack under her feet. The workers were gone, but Vincent had left a new set of keys on the counter along with a note. The security system is armed. Code is 1018. Your mother's birthday, I believe. Lena crumpled the note, fighting the urge to scream. He knew her mother's birthday. Of course he did. For 3 days, life proceeded with an eerie calm. She baked in her transformed kitchen, delivered orders to Adrian's restaurants, avoided thinking about the fact that her entire existence had been carefully curated by a man she'd met once 4 years ago, without knowing it. On the 4th night, she stayed late perfecting a new recipe, lavender honey scones for a wedding order. The street outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles over Chicago neighborhoods after the bars close but before the early commuters wake. She was locking up when she noticed them. 2 men sitting in a gray sedan across the street. They'd been there when she arrived that morning. Same car. Same position. One was smoking, the small orange glow of his cigarette flaring and fading like a heartbeat. Lena's stomach clenched. She pretended not to notice, walking toward the bus stop with forced casualness. Behind her, she heard a car door open. She walked faster. Miss Foster. The voice made her spin around. One of the men stood 5 feet away, middle-aged, with a weather-beaten face and cheap suit that hung wrong on his shoulders. His partner remained by the car, watching. You need to stop, the man said. His voice was flat, emotionless. Stop baking for devils. Excuse me? He held out a folded piece of paper. Lena took it with numb fingers, her other hand already reaching for her phone. The man saw the movement and shook his head. That would be unwise. Read the note. Make the right choice. He returned to the sedan and both men drove away, the engine noise fading into the night. Lena's hand shook as she unfolded the paper. The message was handwritten in neat block letters. Moretti's charity cases don't end well. Ask the others. Stop working for him before you're another headline. Below the words was a symbol, a crown with 3 stars above it, drawn in red ink that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Lena ran the 4 blocks to her apartment and triple-locked the door behind her. She sat on her bed, staring at the note, her mind racing through options. Call the police? And say what? That someone left her a vague, threatening message? Go to Adrian? And confirm she was exactly the kind of liability he'd predicted? At 2 a.m., she made her decision. She took a photo of the note and texted it to the number on Adrian's business card. The response came within 60 seconds. Stay inside. Lock your doors. Someone will be there in 10 minutes. It was actually 8 minutes. The knock was quiet but firm. Lena checked the peephole and saw Vincent, looking unnervingly alert for the middle of the night. May I come in? He asked when she opened the door. Her apartment suddenly felt tiny with him in it. He studied the note without touching it, his expression carefully neutral. Where did you encounter these men? Outside the bakery. They were waiting in a car. Description. She told him everything she could remember. The gray sedan, the cheap suits, the way the smoker had a tattoo on his left hand that might have been a cross or a dagger. Vincent made a phone call, speaking quietly in Italian. When he hung up, he looked at her with something that might have been respect. Mr. Moretti wants you to come to his residence. He says you'll be safer there. No, the word came out sharper than she intended. I'm not running to him every time something happens. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. Miss Foster, does he know what this symbol means? She pointed to the crown and stars. Vincent hesitated, which told her everything. Yes. Then tell him to meet me at the bakery tomorrow morning. Early. 6 a.m., she crossed her arms. And tell him to come alone. If this is about me, I deserve to know the truth without an audience of bodyguards. That's not advisable. I don't care what's advisable. I care about what's happening and why. Lena moved toward the door. A clear dismissal. 6 a.m., Vincent. Make sure he's there. After Vincent left, Lena didn't sleep. She researched instead, using her phone to search for the symbol. The crown with 3 stars appeared in several old news articles, gang markings, territorial disputes, a string of unsolved murders from 15 years ago. All connected to one name, the Romano family. By dawn, she'd learned enough to be terrified. The Romanos had controlled the South Side before Adrian's rise to power. Their feud was legendary in Chicago's criminal underworld, brutal, bloody, supposedly ended a decade ago when the Romano patriarch died in federal prison. But the symbol was back, which meant the feud wasn't over. And somehow, impossibly, Lena was now standing directly in the middle of it. At 5:45 a.m., she walked to her bakery through streets still dark with night. The new security system beeped as she entered. She made coffee with shaking hands and waited. At exactly 6 a.m., Adrian's Mercedes pulled up outside. He came alone as requested. Through the window, Lena watched him approach, moving with that same fluid confidence even in the pre-dawn darkness. When he entered, his eyes immediately found the note she'd laid on the counter. His face went absolutely still. Then, quietly, "How long have the Romanos been watching you?" "You tell me," Lena said. "Because apparently I'm working for devils, and I'd like to know which devil I should be more afraid of." Adrian picked up the note, his jaw tightening as he studied the symbol. "The Romanos," he said the name like a curse. "I thought we'd buried this family 10 years ago." "Well, they're clearly not buried." Lena poured coffee with hands that had steadied overnight. Fear, she'd learned, eventually crystallized into anger. "They think I'm your spy. You're not my anything. You're
owed."
"Yes, you keep saying that." She set a cup in front of him harder than necessary, coffee sloshing over the rim.
"But they don't see it that way.
They see a woman getting money from Adrian Moretti. They think I'm laundering cash or passing information or whatever it is people in your world do." Adrian's expression darkened. "My world. You say that like I chose it. Didn't you? My father chose it. My grandfather before him. I inherited an empire built on blood and fear, and I've spent 15 years trying to make it legitimate. He gestured toward the window. Those restaurants you're supplying? Real businesses. The import companies? Legal. I pay taxes, employ people, contribute to this city. With money that came from where? Lena challenged. From places I'm not proud of. His honesty surprised her. But I can't change the past. I can only control what happens next. And what happens next is keeping you alive. Lena sat across from him, the counter between them like a barrier. Tell me about the Romanos. Adrian was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. Victor Romano controlled the South Side for 30 years. Drugs, weapons, extortion, everything ugly. When I took over my father's operations, I decided to go straight. Victor saw it as weakness. We went to war. Who won? No one wins wars like that.
People die.
Businesses burn. Families get destroyed. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him suddenly look tired. Victor went to prison for racketeering. His sons scattered. I thought the family was finished. But Victor's nephew, Marcus Romano, disappeared before the arrests. Word was he fled to Italy, started over. Adrian looked at the symbol again. If he's back, if he's rebuilding the family operation, he'll see my legitimate businesses as targets. And you, he met her eyes. You're visible now. Working for me, protected by me. You're a way to send a message. Lena's coffee had gone cold. She stared into the cup, thinking, your payments to me, the anonymous ones, before last week. How did they show up?
Through various accounts. Why?
Because I keep detailed records. Every expense, every income source, every supplier. An idea was forming, still hazy but gaining shape. If the Romanos think I'm laundering money, they must be doing the same thing. And if they're watching me, maybe. She stood abruptly. Come with me. She led him to the back office, a cramped room barely bigger than a closet, but organized with military precision. File boxes lined metal shelves, each labeled by year. She pulled down the one marked 2024. I didn't understand it at first, Lena said, spreading invoices across the small desk. 6 months ago, I started getting these orders. Big orders. Wedding cakes, corporate events, delivery addresses I'd never heard of. She pointed to one. This one. 500 cupcakes, delivered to 2847 West Harrison. I remember because when I showed up, it was an abandoned office building.
No wedding.
No people. But the payment cleared. Adrian leaned in, studying the invoice. You delivered to an empty building? 3 times.
Different addresses, same pattern.
I thought maybe I'd written down the locations wrong, or they'd changed venues last minute. But the money was good and I needed it. She pulled out more invoices. Then I noticed something. Look at the payment methods. Adrian examined them. All cashier's checks. Different banks. Exactly. No credit cards, no company checks. Just cashier's checks that couldn't be traced. Lena felt her pulse quicken as the pieces connected. I'm not the only bakery in Chicago. If they're doing this to me, they're probably doing it to others. Restaurants, caterers, suppliers, any business that deals in cash and doesn't ask too many questions. Shell companies, Adrian said quietly. They're using legitimate small businesses to move dirty money. Order goods that never get delivered, or deliver to fake addresses, create paper trails that look real. He looked at her with new respect. You figured this out on your own? I'm good with numbers. It's why I've kept this bakery alive for 3 years. She pulled out more files. But here's the thing, I have addresses.
Dates.
Payment records. If I could cross-reference these with other businesses, find a pattern. Adrian was already pulling out his phone. Vincent. I need financial records for every small business in the South Side that's reported unusual cash transactions in the last year.
Yes, now.
A call in favors at the banks if you have to. He hung up and looked at Lena. This could work. If we can prove Romano's using local businesses for money laundering, we can destroy him without firing a shot.
We.
Lena raised an eyebrow. You just declared war on the Romano family by being smart enough to notice their operation. Adrian's expression was grim. You're in this now, whether either of us likes it. Lena thought about the men in the gray sedan, the threatening note, the way her peaceful life had shattered in less than a week. She could run. Close the bakery, leave Chicago, start over somewhere else. But running meant they won. Running meant letting them scare her into silence. Okay, she said finally, but we do this right. No violence.
Nobody is.
We destroy them the legal way. Adrian extended his hand. The legal way. She shook it, sealing a partnership she never wanted but couldn't escape. His grip was firm, warm, and when he smiled it was small but genuine. You know, he said, my mother would have liked you. For the next 72 hours, Lena's bakery became an unlikely war room. Vincent arrived with boxes of financial documents, bank records, business licenses, tax filings that should have been confidential, but mysteriously appeared on her back office desk. Adrian came and went at odd hours, sometimes in suits, sometimes in jeans and a leather jacket that made him look less like a CEO and more like the dangerous man he probably still was. Lena worked through the numbers with an accountant's precision. She cross-referenced her fake orders against 50 other small businesses, restaurants, catering companies, flower shops, even a funeral home. The pattern emerged like a photograph in developing solution: regular orders, cashiers' check payments, delivery addresses that led nowhere. 17 businesses, she told Adrian on the third night, spreading a hand-drawn map across her counter. All South Side. All showing the same irregularities over the past 8 months. Adrian studied the map, his expression dark. Marcus has been back longer than I thought. He's been rebuilding quietly, using legitimate businesses as cover. There's more. Lena pulled out a spreadsheet she created. The total money moving through these fake orders? Just over $3 million in 8 months. That's not small-time operation. That's organized, patient, smart. Marcus was always the smart one, Adrian muttered. Victor relied on fear and brutality. Marcus used his spreadsheets and shell companies. He looked at her. You're sure about these numbers? I've checked them 4 times. The pattern's clear. Lena hesitated. But having the pattern isn't the same as having proof that would hold up in court.
No.
But it's enough for what I have in mind. Adrian pulled out his phone, making a call. David? It's more Eddie. I need you to call in that favor with the Tribune. He listened. Yes, the big one. I'm sending over documentation of a money laundering operation. $3 million moved through Southside businesses to fund organized crime. Get your best investigative reporter on it. Another pause. Tomorrow morning's edition. Front page. He hung up and made 3 more calls, one to someone at the IRS, another to a state prosecutor, the last to what sounded like a federal agent. Each conversation was brief, professional, and devastating. By the time he finished, the trap was set. They'll audit every business on this list, Adrian explained. The legitimate owners will be cleared. They didn't know they were being used. But the trail will lead back to Marcus's shell companies. The fake receiving addresses, the dummy corporations, the whole infrastructure. Lena felt a chill run through her. You're exposing him. I'm burying him under legal scrutiny. By noon tomorrow, every law enforcement agency in Illinois will be crawling over the Romano operation.
No bullets. Nobody is.
Just subpoenas and warrants and accountants. Adrian's smile was sharp. The kind of destruction that sticks. Won't he know it came from you? He'll suspect. But he won't be able to prove it. And more importantly, Adrian's gray eyes met hers. He'll be too busy trying to avoid federal prison to come after you. The morning paper hit with the force of a bomb. The headline screamed, Romano crime family resurrection, millions laundered through innocent small businesses. The article was thorough, devastating, and sourced well enough to avoid lawsuits. By 10 a.m., 2 federal agencies had issued statements about ongoing investigations. By noon, 3 Romano lieutenants had been arrested. Lena watched it unfold on her phone while pretending to work, her hands mechanically kneading dough while her mind raced. Adrian had done exactly what he promised, destroyed his enemy without violence, using information as a weapon sharper than any knife. Around 2 p.m., Vincent appeared at her door. Mr. Moretti asked me to check on you. Make sure no one's bothered you.
Fine.
It's been quiet too quiet, actually. The gray sedan hadn't returned. No more threatening notes. Is it really over? The Romano family's accounts are frozen. Their properties are under investigation. Marcus Romano is likely on a plane to somewhere without extradition treaties. Vincent allowed himself a small smile. You've done what Mr. Moretti's men couldn't do in 10 years of street wars. You made them afraid of something they couldn't shoot or threaten. The law, Lena said quietly. Precisely. The IRS doesn't care how tough you are. Tax fraud doesn't care about your connections. You found a weakness no one else saw, he set an envelope on her counter. Mr. Moretti wanted you to have this. After Vincent left, Lena opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in Adrian's sharp handwriting. Miss Foster, my mother used to say that true strength isn't in how hard you can hit, but in knowing when not to. You taught me that lesson this week. The Romano family will spend the next decade fighting legal battles they cannot win, and not a single life was lost in the process. That's not mercy. It's strategy. And it's more effective than anything I learned from my father. Thank you for showing me there's another way. A.M. Lena folded the letter carefully, something warm and complicated settling in her chest. Adrian Moretti was still a dangerous man. Still someone whose past was soaked in blood and whose future remained uncertain. But maybe, just maybe, people could change. Maybe the son didn't have to become his father. Maybe a man who'd spent his life learning violence could be taught that sometimes the pen, or in this case the spreadsheet, really was mightier than the sword. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for proving me wrong about what's possible. Lena smiled despite herself and got back to work, kneading dough in her transformed bakery, in a city that suddenly felt a little bit safer. 3 days of silence followed the Romano collapse. The news cycle moved on, chasing newer scandals. The federal investigation continued its grinding bureaucratic march. Lena returned to something resembling normal life, baking, delivering orders, trying not to think about money laundering and organized crime. Then Adrian showed up at closing time with blood on his shirt. Not a lot. Just a dark stain spreading across the white fabric beneath his jacket, partially hidden but unmistakable once Lena noticed. He walked in like nothing was wrong, moving with that same fluid confidence, but she saw him favor his left side. You're bleeding, she said, dropping the tray she'd been cleaning. It's nothing, he waved dismissively. I came to finalize next month's delivery schedule. You're bleeding. Lena locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. Sit down before you fall down. Miss Foster. It's Lena. And sit, she pointed to a chair with enough authority that he actually obeyed, which told her the injury was worse than he'd admit. What happened? Disagreement with some associates. Adrian started to shrug, then winced. They had concerns about my recent business decisions. I addressed their concerns by getting stabbed. Cut. There's a difference. He finally relented when she just stared at him. It's a graze. Barely broke the skin. Lena grabbed her first aid kit from the back office, the extensive one she'd bought after burning herself badly on an oven rack last year. Take off your jacket. That's not necessary. Adrian, she used his first name deliberately, watching his eyes flicker with something she couldn't quite read. You came to my bakery bleeding instead of going to a hospital or calling Vincent. That tells me you either can't go to a hospital or you don't want to. Either way, let me help. He studied her for a long moment, then slowly removed his jacket and unbuttoned his shirt. The wound was along his ribs, a 4-inch slash that had soaked through the gauze he'd apparently wrapped himself. Not deep enough for stitches, but definitely more than barely broke the skin. This is going to hurt, Lena warned, pulling on gloves and opening antiseptic wipes. Pain and I are old friends. She cleaned the wound carefully, trying not to notice the other scars mapping his torso. Old knife wounds, what looked like bullet graze, a burn mark shaped like a cigarette. His body told stories he'd never speak aloud, violent chapters written in scar tissue. Adrian sat perfectly still, barely flinching even when the antiseptic must have burned. You're good at this. I've had practice. You don't run a bakery for 3 years without learning emergency first aid. She applied antibiotic ointment, then fresh gauze. The people who did this, are they still a problem? Not anymore. Something in his tone made her pause. Adrian, they're not dead, if that's what you're asking. Just convinced that questioning my methods is bad for their health, he watched her work with surprising gentleness. You're worried I killed them. I'm worried about who you have to be to survive in your world. Someone harder than I want to be, the admission came quietly. My mother used to say the same thing. She thought kindness was weakness, that showing mercy would get me killed. Lena taped down the bandage and met his eyes. Did it? I've been cut, shot, poisoned, and betrayed more times than I can count, he smiled without humor. So maybe she was right. Or maybe, Lena said, stripping off her gloves, she never met someone strong enough to show her that kindness and strength aren't opposites. Adrian went very still. What? You think surviving makes you strong? Fighting back, never backing down, always being harder than the next guy. She sat across from him. But I dragged your mother out of a burning building when I was terrified. I stood up to you in your own office. I helped take down the Romanos using spreadsheets instead of guns. She leaned forward. That took strength. Different strength than what you're used to, but strength all the same. He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. You think I'm not strong? I think you're terrified of being anything else. The words came out softer than she intended. I think you learned that love and weakness are the same thing, that caring about someone gives them power over you. So you keep everyone at arm's length, pay your debts from a distance, and convince yourself that's protection. It is protection. If the Romanos knew how much you, he stopped abruptly. How much I what? Lena's heart beat faster. Adrian looked away, toward the darkened windows. How much you matter. They'd use that against me. Against you. So, you isolate yourself. Never let anyone close. Never let anyone see the man under the armor. She reached out carefully, touching the back of his hand. He didn't pull away. That's not protection, Adrian. That's prison. Better a prison I control than vulnerability I don't. Is it? She squeezed his hand gently. Because from where I'm sitting, you just walked into my bakery bleeding instead of going to your estate full of guards and doctors. You came here to me. That doesn't sound like someone who thinks kindness is weakness. Adrian turned his hand over, his palm meeting hers. His fingers were warm, slightly rough, and they trembled almost imperceptibly. My mother never understood, he said finally. She survived by being hard, unbreakable. When my father died, she became even harder. Told me that's what leaders do. We break others before they break us. What do you think? He laughed quietly, the sound almost painful. I think maybe she was wrong. I think maybe the strongest thing I've ever done was let a stubborn baker with a first aid kit see me bleed. Lena smiled despite the heaviness of the moment. Is that your way of saying thank you? It's my way of saying. He looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. I don't know. I'm not good at this. At what? At being something other than what I was raised to be. Then maybe, Lena said gently, it's time to learn. The fire started at 3:47 a.m. Lena woke to sirens and the acrid smell of smoke seeping through her apartment window. She stumbled to the glass, still half asleep, and saw orange flames licking up from behind the building. Her building. The bakery.
No. No, no, no.
She threw on clothes and ran barefoot down the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs. Outside, neighbors gathered in pajamas and robes, faces painted orange by firelight. The flames were concentrated at the back of Sweet Haven, the storage area where she kept flour, sugar, all her supplies. 2 fire trucks screamed around the corner. Firefighters jumped out, unrolling hoses with practiced efficiency. Lena tried to run forward, but someone grabbed her arm. You can't go in there, a firefighter said firmly. That's my bakery. Everything I have. Ma'am, the building's not safe. Let us do our job. She watched helplessly as they battled the flames. The front of the bakery seemed untouched, but smoke poured from broken windows at the rear. All her supplies. The new equipment Adrian had installed. 3 years of work burning away into nothing. Then she saw something that made her blood run cold. The back storage door, the one that should have been locked from the inside, was standing open. And in the doorway, barely visible through the smoke, was a figure. Someone was still inside. "Someone's in there," Lena screamed, pointing. "There's someone," the firefighters shouted, redirecting their efforts. But before they could reach the door, the figure moved. Not stumbling or falling, but walking deliberately toward the flames, as if trapped or disoriented. Lena's mind flashed to 4 years ago. Different building, same situation. Her body moved before her brain could stop it, ducking under the firefighter's arm and sprinting toward the open door. "Ma'am, stop." She heard them shouting behind her, but she was already at the threshold. Smoke hit her like a wall, thick and choking. She dropped low like she'd learned before, pulling her shirt over her mouth. The heat was intense, but not unbearable yet. The flames were concentrated in the storage area, feeding on cardboard boxes and paper bags. "Hello," she called out, voice muffled. "Where are you?" A cough answered her. "There, to the left, near the walk-in cooler." The figure resolved into clarity. A woman, maybe 60, gray hair, confused expression. She was wearing a nightgown and slippers, completely disoriented. "Come on," Lena grabbed her arm. "We have to go." The woman pulled back. "My cat." "I heard my cat." "There's no cat here." "Please, we have to move." An explosion of sound as something in the storage room gave way. Flames surged forward, cutting off their exit through the back door. Lena's mind raced. The front door, they could reach it if they moved now. She half-dragged, half-carried the older woman through the main bakery. Smoke was thicker here now, visibility down to inches. Her lungs screamed for clean air. The woman stumbled, nearly falling. Then strong hands grabbed them both. Adrian materialized through the smoke like a ghost, his face covered with a wet cloth. He didn't speak, just lifted the older woman over his shoulder and grabbed Lena's wrist, pulling them toward the front entrance. They burst through the door as firefighters rushed in behind them. Cool night air hit Lena's face, and she collapsed onto the sidewalk, coughing violently. Adrian set the woman down gently, already checking her for injuries. "What the hell were you thinking?" he demanded, turning to Lena. His voice was rough with smoke and fury. "You could have died." She was inside. Lena gasped between coughs. "I couldn't just." She wandered in from the senior home next door. A firefighter interrupted, kneeling beside the confused woman. "Mrs. Chun has dementia. She does this sometimes." He looked at Lena. "You saved her life, but that was incredibly reckless." Adrian pulled Lena to her feet, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Don't ever do that again. You did the same thing." "That's different."
How?
"How is it different?" She coughed again, her throat raw. Adrian's expression shifted from anger to something more complicated. "Because if something happened to you," he stopped, jaw clenching. "Just don't." Paramedics arrived, checking them both for smoke inhalation. Mrs. Chin was loaded into an ambulance, confused but alive. The fire was under control now, mostly extinguished, leaving behind smoke damage and the acrid smell of burned supplies. Vincent appeared at Adrian's side, his usual calm replaced by barely contained rage. The fire was deliberately set. Accelerant on the storage boxes. Security cameras were spray-painted over an hour before it started. "Romano's people," Adrian said flatly. "The ones who scattered when the investigation started." "Revenge," Lena whispered. Her legs felt weak. "Desperate revenge." Adrian's expression went cold and hard. "They can't touch me directly anymore, so they're trying to hurt what He caught himself. "What I'm protecting." Vincent's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his face went grim. "We found them. 3 men, staying at a motel on the highway. They're bragging about it on social media, trying to rebuild Romano's reputation." Adrian started toward his car, his intentions clear. Lena grabbed his arm.
No.
He turned to her, eyes blazing. They tried to kill you, and Mrs. Chen, and you. And they failed, she held his gaze, refusing to let go. You said you were done cleaning your hands with fire. You said there was another way. That was before. Before what? Before they proved they're desperate and stupid? She stepped closer. Adrian, if you go after them now, you become what they say you are. Everything we did with the legal approach, all of it means nothing. So, I just let them walk away? No, Lena's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. You turn them in. Give the evidence to the police. Let them face arson charges, attempted murder charges. Let the system you're trying to become part of actually work. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Vincent waited, silent. The sirens continued their wailing backdrop. Finally, Adrian turned to Vincent. Call Detective Morrison. Tell him we have information about the fire. Give him everything. Names, location, evidence. His voice was strained, like each word cost him. And make sure those men are arrested before I change my mind. The arrests happened at dawn. 3 men, all with Romano family connections, taken into custody at a highway motel with enough evidence to guarantee serious prison time. Detective Morrison himself called Adrian to confirm it, and word spread through the neighborhood by breakfast. Lena stood outside Sweet Haven at sunrise, staring at the damage. The back storage area was destroyed, blackened walls, collapsed shelving, everything reduced to charred debris. But the main bakery had survived. Smoke-stained and water-damaged, but structurally sound. The firefighters said she'd been lucky. Another 5 minutes, and the whole building would have gone up. She didn't feel lucky. She felt exhausted, her lungs still raw, her hands shaking every time she thought about flames spreading across cardboard boxes soaked in accelerant. You should be resting, Adrian's voice came from behind her. She didn't turn around. I should be baking. I have orders due tomorrow. A wedding cake for Saturday. Corporate delivery on Monday. All rescheduled. Vincent handled it. He moved to stand beside her, hands in his pockets. In daylight, she could see the dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept either. The insurance adjuster comes this afternoon. They'll cover the repairs. How long will that take? Weeks? Months? Lena's voice cracked. I can't afford to close for months, Adrian. Even with the restaurant contracts, I have rent, utilities, loan payments. Already handled. She finally looked at him. What? I made some calls.
Got a crew together.
They start work this afternoon, emergency repairs, cleaning, restoration. You'll be operational again in 72 hours. Lena felt tears burn behind her eyes. I can't accept that. It's too much. It's not charity. It's self-interest, but his tone was gentle. I need your pastries for my restaurants. And more than that, he turned to face her fully. If you close, if they win even partially, it sends a message. That attacking what's mine comes with no consequences. I can't allow that message. What's yours? Lena repeated softly. Is that what I am? Adrian's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his features. That came out wrong. Did it? You're not property, Lena. He struggled with the words. You're someone I've failed to protect properly. Twice now. First by keeping my distance and making you a target. Then by not anticipating desperate retaliation. You saved my life last night. After putting it in danger, his jaw clenched. If you died in that fire because of me, because of my past, my enemies. But I didn't, she touched his arm, feeling the tension coiled beneath his sleeve. And neither did Mrs. Chen, because you ran into a burning building after us. So maybe stop trying to take credit for things that aren't your fault and accept that sometimes life is just dangerous. Not for you. It shouldn't be dangerous for you. I pulled your mother from a fire 4 years ago. I work in a neighborhood where 3 men thought cornering me was acceptable. I'm a woman in America. Lena smiled without humor. Life's been dangerous long before you showed up, Adrian. At least now I have someone who gives enough of a damn to run into the flames after me. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You matter, he said quietly. More than you should.
More than is wise.
When I saw that fire, when I couldn't find you, he stopped, looking away. I've lost people. My father to a rival's bullet. My mother to age. Men I called brothers to betrayals and wars. But the thought of losing you felt different somehow. Worse. Lena's heart hammered. Adrian. I'm not asking for anything, he continued quickly. I know what I am, what my life is. I wouldn't curse you with that kind of future. But I need you to understand why I'm rebuilding your bakery, why I'll keep protecting you even if you tell me to stop. It's not obligation anymore. It's not debt. It's… I know, Lena whispered. They stood in silence, the morning sun climbing higher, painting the smoke-stained bakery in shades of gold. Around them, the city woke up, cars passing, people heading to work, life continuing despite fire and fear and feelings that complicated everything. 72 hours? Lena finally asked. Maybe less if the crew works overnight. Then I'll be here. Helping. This is still my bakery. I wouldn't expect anything else. Adrian's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned. Vincent needs me. City council meeting about the new youth center project. He hesitated. Will you be okay? I survived a fire. I think I can handle daylight. He smiled, small, genuine, the kind of smile that transformed his face from dangerous to almost gentle. You're remarkable, you know that. I'm stubborn. Same thing in my experience. After he left, Lena walked through the damaged bakery, cataloging what could be saved. The new mixer, smoke-damaged but possibly salvageable. The display cases, cracked but reparable. Her grandmother's rolling pin, a family heirloom, blackened but whole. By noon, Adrian's crew arrived, not thugs or criminals, but actual contractors with permits and equipment. They worked with efficient professionalism, clearing debris, assessing damage, making plans. By evening, the local news ran a story. Southside Bakery rises from ashes. They interviewed neighbors who brought flowers and offers of help. Maya showed up with her teenage daughter, both wearing work gloves and determination. You're not rebuilding alone, Maya said firmly. This neighborhood takes care of its own. And they did. For 3 days, the community poured in, painting walls, cleaning equipment, donating supplies. The Italian grocer down the street provided flour at cost. The hardware store owner installed new locks for free. Even Mrs. Chun, recovered from her smoke inhalation, brought homemade cookies with a note, "For the angel who saved me." On the third evening, as promised, Sweet Haven Bakery reopened. A line stretched around the block, not because people were hungry, but because they wanted to show support. To prove that fear and fire couldn't destroy what kindness built. Lena stood behind her counter, overwhelmed and grateful, watching her neighborhood celebrate survival. And in the back corner, trying to be inconspicuous, Adrian Moretti bought a simple croissant and smiled like he'd won something far more valuable than any war. The grand reopening success carried Sweet Haven through the following weeks. Business boomed, partly from publicity, partly from genuine community support. Lena worked longer hours than ever, but they felt different now. Purposeful, like she was building something that mattered beyond profit margins. Adrian visited less frequently, though Vincent stopped by almost daily to check security and ensure orders reached the restaurants. Lena told herself she wasn't disappointed by Adrian's absence. Told herself the flutter of excitement when his Mercedes occasionally appeared was just gratitude, nothing more. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. 3 weeks after the fire, Vincent arrived with an unusual request. Mr. Moretti would like you to join him for dinner. Tonight, if you're available. Lena's hands stilled on the dough she was kneading. Dinner? At his estate. 7 o'clock. He said to tell you it's not business. It's… Vincent paused, choosing words carefully. Personal. Her pulse quickened. Personal how? That's between you and Mr. Moretti. I'm simply the messenger. But Vincent's expression held something that might have been approval. A car will pick you up at 6:30. Lena spent the afternoon in a state of nervous confusion. She had nothing appropriate to wear to a Mafia boss's estate. Everything in her closet screamed, struggling small business owner, not dinner guest of Chicago's most powerful crime, former crime figure. She settled on a simple navy dress Maya had convinced her to buy last year, paired with the only heels she owned that didn't hurt after 10 minutes. At 6:30 sharp, a town car arrived. The driver was polite, professional, and silent during the 30-minute drive north. Adrian's estate sat behind iron gates in a neighborhood where houses were called properties and had actual names. The gates opened smoothly, revealing a sprawling Victorian mansion that looked like it belonged in a history book, all stone and stained glass and architecture that predated her great-grandparents. Adrian met her at the door himself, no butler or servant in sight. He traded his usual suit for dark slacks and a gray sweater that made his eyes look like silver. He seemed nervous, which was oddly comforting. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." Vincent didn't really phrase it as optional. It was absolutely optional. "I'll have a word with him." Adrian gestured inside. "Please." The interior was surprisingly warm, not the cold museum she'd expected, but lived-in spaces with comfortable furniture and family photos on the walls. He led her through to a dining room where a table was set for two, candles already lit, food waiting under silver covers. "You cooked?" Lena asked, surprised.
God, no.
"I'd poison us both." He pulled out her chair. "My housekeeper, Rosa, prepared everything before leaving for the evening. I wanted privacy for this conversation." They sat. Adrian uncovered the dishes: chicken marsala, roasted vegetables, fresh bread that smelled heavenly. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Lena couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. "Why am I here, Adrian?" He set down his fork carefully. "Because you deserve the full truth. About your father." Lena's breath caught. "My father?" "Thomas Foster. He worked for my father's organization 26 years ago. Mechanic at one of the garages we owned, the legitimate side of the business." Adrian's expression was serious. "You never knew that, did you?" "My father died when I was 3.
Car accident.
My mother said he worked at various auto shops, but she never talked about the details." Lena's mind raced. "He worked for your family for 5 years.
He was good at his job. Honest.
Reliable." Adrian paused. "When I was 17, my father started using the garages for other purposes. Stripping stolen cars, hiding vehicles used in crimes. He pressured the mechanics to participate or look the other way." Lena's stomach knotted. "And my father?" "Refused. Told my father that he had a wife and daughter, that he wouldn't risk prison and leave his family without support." Adrian's voice carried something like admiration. "Most men would have just gone along out of fear. Your father stood his ground." "What happened?" "My father let him go."
No retaliation, no threats.
"He respected the decision, even if he didn't like it." Adrian met her eyes. 2 weeks later, your father died in that car accident. Brake failure on a steep hill. The implication hung in the air. Lena felt cold. "Did your father?" "No." Adrian's response was immediate and firm. "I've spent years investigating that accident, accessing police reports, mechanical analyses. It was genuine brake failure. Old vehicle, deferred maintenance. Just tragic coincidence." He leaned forward. "But here's what matters. When your father died, my father blamed himself anyway. He felt like he'd forced an honest man out of steady employment, and that economic pressure led to your father driving an unsafe vehicle. I don't understand what this has to do with why I've been protecting you." Adrian pulled an envelope from his pocket. "After your father's funeral, my father set up a trust. Money was supposed to go to your mother, help with your expenses. But she disappeared, moved out of state, changed addresses frequently. By the time I took over the organization, I'd lost track of you both." He slid the envelope across the table. "Your mother died 6 years ago. You moved back to Chicago 5 years ago. And when I finally found you again, you were working at St. Catherine's Hospital, where you saved my mother's life." Lena opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were documents, old trust papers, bank statements, a letter in unfamiliar handwriting. "That's my father's letter," Adrian explained. Written 3 days before he died. He never sent it because he couldn't find your mother, but he wrote it anyway, his voice softened. Read it. Lena unfolded the yellowed paper. Mrs. Foster, your husband was one of the few honest men I've known. His integrity cost him his job, and I will carry that regret to my grave. This trust is inadequate compensation for your loss, but please accept it as acknowledgement that good men deserve better than the world gave Thomas Foster. My hope is that his daughter grows up knowing her father chose honor over ease. That's a legacy worth more than any amount of money. Dominic Moretti. Tears blurred Lena's vision. I never knew any of this. Neither did I, until after my father died, and I found his personal papers. By then, I was trying to go legitimate, distance myself from the old ways. Adrian's expression was raw with honesty. Finding you again, learning you'd saved my mother, it felt like the universe giving me a chance to repay a debt that crossed generations, to honor both my father's regret and your father's integrity. So, everything you've done, started as obligation, became something more. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. Your father refused to compromise his principles even when it cost him everything. You ran into a burning building to save a stranger. You stood up to me when most people are too afraid to make eye contact. You taught me that strength and kindness aren't opposites. Lena wiped her eyes. My father would have liked you, I think, the you that you're becoming. I hope so. Adrian finally took her hand, his grip warm and solid. Because I'm trying to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you in his life. Not as a debt or obligation, but as, he paused, vulnerable, as something real. Outside, night had fully fallen. Inside, two people sat together, connected by tragedy and choice, by past debts and present possibilities, by everything they'd survived to reach this moment. I'd like that, Lena said softly. Something real. Adrian smiled, genuine, unguarded, free of the armor he usually wore. Then let's start there. The months that followed felt like discovering a new language, one where trust was built in quiet moments rather than grand gestures. Adrian visited the bakery more frequently, always finding excuses, checking on supply orders, discussing restaurant menus, bringing feedback from customers. They both knew these were pretexts for spending time together, and neither pretended otherwise. He learned that Lena woke at 4 every morning, that she hummed while kneading dough, that she donated day-old pastries to the homeless shelter without telling anyone. She learned that Adrian read poetry late at night, that he anonymously funded 3 youth programs, that his ruthless reputation masked someone who'd never learned it was safe to be soft. They didn't label what was growing between them. Labels felt limiting, premature. But when Adrian's hand found hers across her bakery counter, when she leaned into his shoulder while reviewing contracts, when their goodbyes stretched longer each time, those moments spoke clearly enough. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow that transformed Chicago into something clean and beautiful. Lena was closing up on a Saturday evening, humming Christmas carols while wiping down counters, when Adrian appeared at her door. He wasn't alone. Vincent stood behind him, carrying a leather folder that looked expensive and important. We need to talk, Adrian said, his expression unreadable. Lena's stomach dropped. Those words, in her experience, never preceded good news. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. But there's something I need to give you. He gestured to a table.
Seat.
Please. She sat, nervousness crawling up her spine. Vincent placed the folder in front of her, then stepped back with the discretion of someone who'd learned when to be invisible. Adrian remained standing, hands in his pockets. When I started helping you 3 years ago, I bought this building through a shell company. You've been paying rent to one of my holding corporations without knowing it. I know that now, Lena said carefully. What you don't know is that I never intended to keep it permanently. The building, the property, it was always meant to be temporary. He nodded toward the folder. Open it. Lena's hands shook as she opened the leather cover. Inside were legal documents, dense with terminology she didn't fully understand. But certain words jumped out. Deed transfer, property rights, full ownership. I don't understand. It's yours, Adrian's voice was quiet but firm. The building, the land beneath it, everything. I'm transferring full ownership to you. No strings, no conditions, no ties to my businesses. It's a clean transfer, your property, your name on the deed. Lena stared at the papers, her mind refusing to process. You can't just give me a building. I can. He finally sat across from her. Sweet Haven Bakery should belong to the woman who built it. Not to some corporation in my portfolio, not to a landlord who could raise rent or sell out from under you. To you. Adrian, this is. She searched for words. This property is worth what, $500,000? More? You can't just. I can't. He raised an eyebrow. Who's going to stop me? Basic sense. Logic. The fact that this is insane. Lena pushed the folder back toward him. I can't accept this. It's too much. Adrian pushed it back. You cover my mother in ash and smoke to drag her from a fire. You nearly died saving her. You think a building is too much payment for someone's life. That's not why I saved her. I didn't do it for a reward. I know. That's exactly why you deserve this. He leaned forward, intensity burning in his gray eyes. Lena, listen to me. I've spent my entire life taking territory, taking power, taking respect through fear. I want to give something meaningful, something that can't be twisted into obligation or control. But no strings, he repeated. If you never want to see me again, if you decide tomorrow that you can't have someone like me in your life, this building is still yours. If you want to sell it, renovate it, expand it, burn it down for the insurance. It's your choice. Your property. Your future. Tears burned behind Lena's eyes. Why are you doing this? Because. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Because you saved my mother, yes. Because your father was one of the few honest men in my father's world. But also because you've shown me what it means to build instead of take. You created something real, something good, in a neighborhood everyone else abandoned. And I want that to be secure. I want you to be secure. Vincent cleared his throat softly. There's more, Miss Foster. Adrian shot him a look, but Vincent continued smoothly. The trust your father-in-law established for you? It still exists. With interest over 26 years, it amounts to approximately $340,000. That money is also being transferred to you. No legal complications, fully documented, entirely legitimate. Lena couldn't breathe. The numbers were incomprehensible, life-changing, terrifying. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Adrian's hand covered hers on the table. Say you'll let me do this one good thing. Say you'll stop carrying the weight of survival alone and let someone help shoulder it. She looked at their joined hands, at the legal documents that represented more security than she'd ever imagined, at the man who'd entered her life through violence and was now offering freedom. The trust money, that was supposed to go to my mother. It's yours now. She would have wanted you to have it. And the building? Also yours. Completely. I'll have no legal connection to it after the transfer completes. He squeezed her hand gently. You saved someone I loved when you had every reason to save yourself first. You ran toward fire twice, once for my mother, once for a stranger. You taught me that honor isn't weakness and kindness isn't surrender. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. You deserve a foundation that can't be shaken. A place that's truly yours, that no one can take away. Let me give you that. Please. Lena wiped her eyes with her free hand. You're impossible. I've been called worse. This doesn't mean, she struggled with the words. This doesn't obligate me to anything. To you. I know. That's the point, Adrian smiled softly. Though I'm hoping you'll keep me around anyway. Your coffee's terrible, but the company's excellent. She laughed despite the tears. My coffee is not terrible. It absolutely is. But I keep drinking it, which should tell you something. Vincent diplomatically excused himself, leaving them alone in the quiet bakery. Snow fell outside the windows, soft and steady. Lena looked at the papers again, her name, her property, her future. Okay, she whispered finally. Okay. Okay, I accept. The building, the trust, all of it. She met his eyes. But, Adrian, this doesn't make us even. You don't owe me anything anymore. Good. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Because what comes next, I want it to be choice. Not debt. Not obligation. Just two people who found something unexpected in a dark alley and decided it was worth keeping. Something unexpected, Lena repeated, smiling through tears. That's one way to put it. Do you have a better description? She thought about fires and spreadsheets, about fear and trust, about a man learning to be soft and a woman learning to accept help. About foundations built from ash and futures created from choice. No, she said softly. Unexpected is perfect. Spring arrived with the kind of gentle insistence that made Chicago remember why people lived there despite brutal winters. Trees budded along the sidewalks, and Sweet Haven Bakery, now officially owned by Lena Foster, mortgage-free, flourished with the season. The property transfer had gone through without complications. The trust money sat in Lena's bank account, mostly untouched except for a donation to the burn unit at St. Catherine's Hospital and new equipment for the shelter where she'd been volunteering. She was still learning to think of herself as someone with financial security, still catching herself calculating prices and pinching pennies from old habit. Adrian had kept his promise.
No strines.
No pressure. But he also hadn't disappeared from her life. If anything, he was more present, not as a benefactor or protector, but as something simpler and more complicated. As a man spending time with a woman he cared about, learning the ordinary rhythms of a life he'd never lived. The Romano family's remnants had been absorbed by federal investigations. Marcus Romano himself was arrested in Portugal, facing extradition. The men who'd set the fire were serving 8-year sentences. The neighborhood felt safer, though Lena knew safety was always temporary, always fragile. Adrian's legitimate businesses continued to grow. He'd distanced himself further from anything questionable, though Lena wasn't naive enough to believe his past had completely released its grip. Some stains didn't wash out. Some reputations followed you like shadows. But he was trying. That mattered more than she'd expected. It was a Thursday evening in late April when Adrian showed up at closing time without warning. The sun was setting, painting the bakery windows in shades of amber and rose. Lena was boxing up the last pastries for the shelter when he walked in, and something about his expression made her pause. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but he seemed uncertain, which was unusual. I wanted to ask you something. Lena set down the pastry box. That sounds ominous. It's not. It's just. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was uncomfortable. I'm going away for a while. Her heart sank. How long? A month, maybe 6 weeks. There's a business opportunity in Italy. Completely legitimate. I'm meeting with wine distributors, restaurant suppliers. Vincent verified everything. He pulled out his phone, showing her itineraries and contracts as if he needed to prove his intentions. But it means being overseas for an extended period. Okay, Lena kept her voice steady, though disappointment settled heavy in her chest. That's good for your business. Come with me. The words hung in the air between them. Lena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What?
Come to Italy.
Not for business, for you. For us. Adrian stepped closer. See Tuscany and Rome. Eat real Italian food. Take a month away from 4 a.m. wake-ups and flour dust. Let someone take care of you for once. Adrian, I can't just leave the bakery for a month. Maya's been running her own catering business for 10 years. She could manage Sweet Haven with her eyes closed, and she's already offered. He smiled slightly. I may have mentioned I was going to ask you. You planned this. I hoped for this. There's a difference. He took her hands in his. Lena, we've spent 6 months building something. Something real and important and terrifying for someone like me. But it's all been here in your world, surrounded by your work and responsibilities. I want to show you mine. Not the business, not Chicago, but the parts of my life that aren't about territory or reputation. The parts I'm still learning to let exist. Lena's mind raced through 1,000 objections. The bakery, the customers, the fear of what it meant to say yes to something this big. But underneath the fear was something else. The memory of running into fires, of taking risks, of choosing courage over safety. 1 month, she said finally. Maybe 6 weeks. 1 month, she repeated firmly. And I'm paying for my half of everything. Adrian laughed. You're impossible. You've mentioned that before. Have dinner with me tonight. Here, he gestured to the empty bakery. No restaurants, no fancy places. Just us, your terrible coffee, and whatever pastries didn't sell. My coffee is not, she stopped, seeing his grin. You're deliberately provoking me. Is it working? Instead of answering, Lena grabbed 2-day-old croissants and the French press she'd started keeping in back. They sat at the same table where she'd once cleaned his wounds, where they'd plotted the Romano's downfall, where so many small moments had accumulated into something neither of them had names for yet. My mother used to love these, Adrian said, tearing off a piece of croissant. She'd buy them every Sunday from a bakery in Little Italy. Not as good as yours, but close. Tell me about her. The real her, not just the woman I saved.
So he did.
He told her about a woman who loved opera and made terrible jokes, who'd stayed with his father despite everything, who'd tried to prepare her son for a brutal world while secretly hoping he'd find a way out of it. She would have liked you, Adrian said eventually. Not because you saved her life, but because you would have argued with her, challenged her. She respected people who didn't back down. I get the feeling I inherited that from my father. Probably. He reached across the table, brushing flour from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was tender, intimate. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. For seeing something worth saving under all the armor and anger. His voice dropped lower. For teaching me that being loved doesn't mean being weak. Lena's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had used that word, let it exist in the open air between them. Adrian. You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come to Italy with me.
Let me show you what it means to rest.
To trust someone else to keep things standing while you just exist. She thought about her father, who'd chosen integrity over security. About Adrian's mother, who'd survived fire because a stranger chose courage. About every moment that had led to this one. The alley, the flames, the spreadsheets, the quiet rebuilding of two people who'd learned how to be something other than survivors. Okay, she whispered.
Yes.
1 month in Italy. He kissed her then, slow and sweet and tasting like croissants and coffee and promises neither of them knew how to make yet, but were learning. Weeks later, as dusk settled over Chicago one last time before their flight, Adrian stopped by the bakery. Lena was doing final inventory checks, making lists for Maya, triple-checking everything because letting go was still hard. He bought the last pastry of the day, a simple butter cookie, the kind his mother had loved. Will you finally rest now? Lena asked, watching him through the glass case. Maybe. If you promise to keep baking when we get back. Not for me, not for the restaurants, but because this city needs your light. Because you built something that matters. That's a lot of pressure for butter and sugar. You've never been just butter and sugar. He left money on the counter, too much, as always, and turned toward the door. Then he stopped, pulling something from his pocket. An envelope, sealed with old-fashioned wax. Don't open it until we land in Rome, he said. Consider it the beginning of something new. After he left, after she'd locked up and set the security system and stood in her bakery, bought and paid for, safe and secure, Lena held the envelope up to the fading light. She'd open it in Rome. She'd see Italy with a man who was learning how to be gentle, how to build instead of destroy. She'd take a month to remember that she was more than just work and survival. But for now, she stood in the space she'd created, surrounded by the smell of vanilla and yeast, in a neighborhood that had supported her through fire and fear, and she let herself feel something she hadn't allowed in years. Hope. Pure, uncomplicated, terrifying hope. Outside, Adrian's Mercedes idled at the curb. Through the window, She saw him watching her, patient and present. When their eyes met, he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. She grabbed her coat and locked the door behind her, leaving Sweet Haven safe for tomorrow while she stepped into today. Into possibility. Into whatever came next. The envelope in her pocket was light as air, heavy as promise. She'd read it in Rome, in another country, in another version of her life. But she already knew what it would say, could feel the words taking shape. You saved my family once. Tonight, I return the favor. Tomorrow, we save each other.
A.
As the car pulled away from the curb, Lena looked back at her bakery one last time. The lights were off, but somehow it glowed anyway, warm and alive and waiting. Just like her future. Just like love that built itself from ashes, one careful choice at a time, until it became strong enough to last. The end.